Okay, with that, we're gonna try to wrap a little early today, but I'll manage that. And with that, I'm gonna introduce John Henry Spann. So come on up, John Henry. I'll keep this. I'm sure you like to be talked about a lot, so I'm gonna introduce you.
Talk about myself.
Yeah, okay, there you go. So John Henry Spann, I know him personally. My kids go to school at St. John Bosco, but John Henry Spann is a Catholic husband, father to 5 children. He lives on his farm up in North Georgia in Ball Ground. And he's worked in secondary education at all levels, from football coach to principal. He's passionate about his authentic Catholic education, is currently the Dean of Academics at St. John Bosco, a K through 12 hybrid school in North Atlanta. He frequently speaks at colleges and retreats, as well as education conferences on topics ranging from Catholic masculinity to maintaining identity and mission. He's appeared on various radio shows and podcasts covering a variety of topics related to faith, apologetics, and the restoration of Western civilization. So with that, John Henry Spann, thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeff. All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for that introduction, Jeff. I apologize in advance. I'm a big-time pacer. I'm going to walk around a little bit. I was told to stay between the curtains for the sake of the camera, and I'm going to do my best. My name is John Henry Spann. I am the father of 5 kids. I've got one boy who is turning 12 tomorrow, day after tomorrow, and I have 4 girls, which I am embracing. It's been good. I was going to have 8 boys. That was my plan when I got married when I was 21, and I'm loving the ladies. # girl dad, whatever it is I'm supposed to say. I'm very excited to be here today. I am. I'm super pumped. I'm a little bit nervous. I usually give talks to high school, college age guys. Every now and then I'll do a co-ed thing, or I've done 1 or 2 girls talks before, but it's mostly guys. I really like to work with those, to work with sort of guys in that age group, young married men, things like that. And I normally stand up and walk around, wave my hands, and just sort of talk about masculinity and what it means to be authentically Catholic, right? And what authentic Catholic masculinity looks like, right? What being rooted in Christ versus rooted in things of the world looks like, and porn. I talk a ton about porn. I'm not going to talk much about porn today, but it's almost like a contractual obligation that I have with myself, because I'm not getting paid to be here. And so you're going to have to listen to me talk about porn for a few minutes, because I have a microphone, and Jeff is very polite, and I don't think he's going to come take it from me. I talk a lot about porn because this is something that I think really needs to be thrown out there just briefly at the beginning, right? If this is something that you're struggling with, it almost definitely has been something you've struggled with. If you're not currently struggling with it, it's something that I've absolutely struggled with. I just want to stand here for a second and beg you to rip that sin out of your heart right now. It is killing you, right? It is killing you, and your family deserves better. Do something. Find an accountability partner. Stop wallowing in it. You're too good for it. Your children need a father who is not bound by this awful soul-rotting sin. And it is a rabbit hole. The scourge, the evil of pornography is a rabbit hole that I could spend the whole morning on. But I actually think it's a really good segue to the talk that I'm going to give today, which I think the title is something along the lines of What Your Kids Wish You Knew. And basically I was asked to give this talk for the first time over at St. Brendan's. And they said, we want you to give a dad's talk to a bunch of the men from the parish, right? And I said, well, I haven't really done that, and what is the age demographic and all of those things, and I started thinking, what do I have? What do I have to tell these people? What do I have to tell men who are more or less, right, mostly older than me, who have children, some of which who have children older than me, who have raised children through the most difficult times. My oldest son is 12. Right, I am still Superman in my house. My daughter still gets scared and comes sleep in my bed with me at night. And I really haven't been in the trenches of raising children in the way that a lot of you have. And so I really dug into that, and what can I contribute? What do I have worth saying? And I thought about it, and I thought after years, I've been doing this for about a decade and a half, working in high schools, giving talks, talking to college guys, going out for wings with, guys from the Catholic Center at UGA or wherever, right? And I said, that's really what I want to dig into. I want to dig into all the things that I am hearing from young men and women who are in high school, who are in college, who have just gotten married. I want to talk about, I want to tell you what they're saying about their upbringing. I want to talk about what they're saying about the wounds that they have received and the things that they wish they could tell their parents, but for whatever reason, they cannot. Now, I want to be really clear once again that I am in no way trying to imply that I have all of this figured out. I've never been a father. And in reading this talk over earlier, I realized that a lot of it sounds harsh. Right? A lot of it sounds fairly judgmental. And that's good. It's supposed to, right? I blame us. I blame all of us, everyone in this room, myself included, men in general, for the state of the Western world, right? But I want to be really clear that I'm judging Western men as a whole and nobody here as an individual, right? And this is a thing that I do sometimes with colleges when I give sort of pointed, mean sort of talks, is I want to start to make it really clear how much I don't think I'm better than you. I want to read the sins from my last confession. Keep a running list on my phone. And I'm not going to pull punches here. This is them. The number one that I've got down here is resentment towards my wife. My wife just gave birth to my 5th child, a little girl. Her name is Georgia. I'm desperately in love with this little girl. I'm desperately in love with my bride. That being said, believe it or not, my wife, who just grew a human being and then pushed her out of my body and now my wife has to use her body to feed this baby. She's like kind of slacking on like chores and stuff. And I've been resentful. Isn't that gross? Isn't that disgusting? What an awful, awful thing, right? But that's there. I wrote anger, right? I tend to have a short temper. I can think of an occasion or two in the last few weeks when I've really snapped at one of my children. And then this one's a little awkward, and this is not something I would share if there were women in the room. But eyes wandering, specifically in regards to YouTube ads. Isn't that gross, right? Why do I get so many ads for like underwear, for like women's underwear? I've never understood that. There's some buxom young woman beside the like video on the decline and fall of the Western Roman Empire or whatever it is that I'm watching. I think that's weird. Language, I struggle with language, and I apologize in advance if any of that slips out today. That's something that I've been fighting for a long, long time. This is from about a week ago when I went to confession. It says, drinking, the near occasion of sin. I had one too many drinks, and I was by myself, and I didn't like that. I reflected the next day, and I was like, oh, my head kind of hurts. And it's not just that I drank, it's that I drank by myself, right? And that's something that I want to avoid doing. And then I wrote little white lies, right? And then embellishment I have beside it. And then judgment of others / pride. And I'm referring directly to the fact that every single time I ever receive communion and I'm a tabernacle of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, I kneel down in the pew and then I judge the way everyone else receives communion. That's why I wrote that down, right? When I am so close with my Lord, with my Creator, and I sit there and I look at the way other people are receiving, and then I think bad things about them. It's gross. And then I have a laundry list of sins of omission, right? Of things that I can do better, of things that I should be doing better. So I read those because I just want to be very, very clear that I'm not here to judge anybody. I'm not here to say that I'm better than anybody, but I am here to say that I have a lot of information that I think is worth sharing. Hey, also, maybe we could edit that out of the video. I didn't really think about that when I just read all my sins out loud. It's fine. You can throw it out. Maybe the underwear ad part. All right, so once again, the only thing that I really bring to the table today is 15 years of having lunch with teenagers, college kids, and young adults, and a face that has always been just, I guess, really inviting for people to overshare. And I said earlier that I thought my brief discussion there on pornography was a good segue, a good transition to this topic. And I think that's true because pornography is near universal, right? Struggling with pornography is near universal amongst our boys, and it's common amongst our girls, and it is the number one, hands down, right? The number one aspect of young men's lives that they speak with me about. I'll stand up at a college, I'll give a talk, I'll talk a lot about morality, I'll talk about pornography, and then afterwards I'll have a lot of guys who come up and talk to me. And it would break your heart. It would break the heart of every man in here to hear a 23-year-old man, married, having just had a baby, who's holding back tears as he's asking me, the stranger who just stood up on the stage, right, to go onto his phone and put in some password-protected parental controls, right, because he can't stop returning to this sin. And that's sad, right? That hurts a lot to see that. But what's way more heartbreaking is that in the same breath, he's going to give one of 1,000 iterations of, why did my parents allow me to fall into that? And parents, that's generous because it's almost always, why didn't my dad do anything to save me from this? Why am I now a grown man trying to be a man, just hobbled by the sin that has been a part of my life from the time I was 11, 12, 13 years old, right? Everyone in this room right now knows that our young people today, they're more comfortable and have the tools to lead an easier life than anyone in the history of the world ever has. And I think almost as a result of that, right, I hope that we all understand that those same young people, as a result, face more temptation and an easier path to hell than any other group of people ever has. I got into some hot water a couple of years ago. I was on a Pints with Aquinas, if you know Matt Fradd. I was on a Pints with Aquinas episode, and I said something that I, in hindsight, is a little controversial. What I said was, I would rather my son grow up and join ISIS than him grow up and be an empty, shallow person who doesn't know what he is or who he stands for, right? That's harsh, right? Why would I say that, right? And I reflected on it. I got a lot of negative feedback, and I decided that I meant every word of it. And here's why, right? Because I will take that fire in my son, right, directed in, like that burning for something, directed at something, even something evil, over what the world is offering him, right? And there was this guy who I think agrees with me, right? That burning for something is better than burning for nothing. He said something along the lines of, be either hot or cold, because the lukewarm I will spew from my mouth. I think we should believe him, right? I think that abject evil is coming for our children. Sin and vice and the literal demons of hell are absolutely trying to destroy their goodness and their dignity and their self-worth. But going back to the why I said I'd rather my son join ISIS thing, I don't think any of us in this room have to worry about our sons and daughters growing up to become like transgender Muslim abortion doctors, right? That's not the fear. The realistic evil is much worse. It's nothing, right? Chances are, unless you stop it, not your family, not the culture, not your priest, not your church, unless you as a father stop it, they're going to grow up to be financially successful, empty people with no sense of identity. People who stand for nothing, whose moral compass boils down to not hurting people's feelings, who are only going to feel real passion in their life or real excitement when their favorite football team wins, or when they get a new pool built in their backyard, or 100 other meaningless things that aren't evil, but they lack virtue. And that is a fate literally worse than death, right? The great tragedy, and the one which my whole life is bent towards avoiding for my kids, is for them to become strangers to me. Strangers at my Thanksgiving table, for them to grow up and be people who don't share any of my values, who we've got all these off-topic things, or these sort of off-limits conversational topics, right? I pray that doesn't happen to my kids every single day, and I pray that it doesn't happen to yours. But as men, we are called to do a whole lot more than just pray about that. And I'm not trying to minimize the importance of prayer. Please do that. But I want to transition right now and get down to brass tacks a little bit about what your kids are saying. Now, I did my best to write out what I'm hearing and only add a minimal amount of commentary, but I really like to talk. I'm an only child. I can't help it. I really like to so I will. I'm sure I'll be going off here a little bit. Number one, these are practical things that I'm hearing, sort of trying to boil down for 15 years having conversations with these kids. Why did my parents give me a phone when I was X years old, right? When I was whatever age it was. Why did they give me a phone? Why did they give me a smartphone? Why did they give me some internet accessible thing? And with girls, right? Even high school girls, right, who are only maybe a few years removed from getting that phone, it usually has to do with social media. It usually has to do with self-image. It usually has to do with self-esteem and stuff like that. With guys, it's usually pornography. Like I said earlier, a lot of times you'll hear, I waste so much time doing X, Y, or Z, right? But that is a big one. And it's coupled usually with another one, right? Even the kids whose parents who are not saying, why did my parents give me this phone when I was 11 years old? Was it so I could look at it, I look at my iPad and shut up while we were at a restaurant, right? Why did they want to talk to me? I fell into all these sins as a result. What was up with that? But more often it's, why didn't they monitor it? Why did my dad hand me a phone when I was 12 years old and tell me to go knock myself out, right? Take it up to my room, lock my room, sit in there, spend hours on it. We all know, I don't need to give you a big lecture. There's 100 documentaries out there. Watch Childhood 2.0. There's a number of really great sources that go into why, right, this sort of feedback loop, the dopamine feedback loop is so terrible for us, right, grown men, let alone our children. And I hear just about, once a week in conversations with these young people, what the hell was my dad thinking? Why the heck would he ever do this to me? Second, why did they let me have those friends? This is normally college-age people, right? College-age, young married people, right? Why did they let me have those friends? Why did they allow me to do these things, right? Why did they allow me to stay involved in that? I'm not knocking all travel sports, but this is a recent example. Why did they let me stay involved in that travel sports team where they heard all these bad things? These boys around me were such a bad influence. They still let me go, right? Why did they leave me in that school environment when they knew it was bad news? This idea that I was supposed to somehow be able to stand up to the culture and stand up to my friends and overcome this peer pressure. I was 15 years old. What was he thinking? Your kids will be the sum total of the 5 people they spend the most time around. You look that up. That's true. There's some science there. I'm not smart enough to know it. But I read a study like 7 years ago, and it really dug into that sort of from a cultural, like a zeitgeist identity sort of standpoint, right? They are going to be the sum total of the 5 people that they spend the most time around. 2 of those people should be their parents, obviously. But then making them do what is good is a part of that. Making them be around. Parenting, right? They want structure. They want to know the rules, and this sounds off color, not off color, but maybe just too reductionist. But I think about my dogs. I have a dog. His name's Jeff. He's not named after Mr. Showalter. You've met him. He's a great dog. He's a black lab. Jeff's a really good dog. I got a lot of rules for Jeff. Right? Jeff is hemmed in a big way, right? I train dogs, and unfortunately, that's one of the best analogies I can think of, not for young people. I'm not saying just for young people. I'm not saying become a dictator in your house, right? But children, young people, me, you, human beings in general need to know what the rules are and what your family stands for, right? They need to have those conversations and understand, right? What is expected of me, and how do I do that? And they're teenagers. If they are teenagers, there's going to be pushback. There's going to be natural pushback, and that's okay, because once again, I have never in my life, that's not true. I've very seldom heard a 20-something-year-old guy or girl say, man, I sure do wish my parents had fewer rules because they loved me. Right? I've heard versions of that. I've heard people take it to the opposite end, right? The opposite extreme, too strict, nothing, never allowed to go do anything, and then there's this big rebellion the second that they're off the leash. But 99% of the time, it's, why on earth would they allow me to do this? Why would they allow me to do that? Why wouldn't they have this conversation about X, Y, or Z? Changing a little bit to the girls. I've got 4 of them, like I said, and so I spend a whole lot of time talking to young women, usually after some of these talks, saying, what'd your dad do right? What did he do wrong? How can I not screw up these 4 beautiful little feminine souls that are in my charge? The number one, hands down, why did my dad stop being physically affectionate with me once I got older? All the time. All the time. It's not to be crass, but it It boils down to, I went through puberty, and then all of a sudden my dad stopped treating me like a little girl, right? He stopped treating me like a princess. He stopped hugging me. He stopped snuggling with me on the couch. He stopped putting his hand around me, right? He stopped putting his arm around me on car rides and holding my hand. Why did he do that? And the answer, I think, is, well, you got to be like a 13-year-old girl. Have you ever met a 13-year-old girl, right? In their relationship with their parents, there's a lot of pushback there. And they don't care. They still wanted the attempt. They still wanted the affection, right? Please, 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 gentlemen, if you have daughters, regardless of how old they are, take them on dates. Do that regularly. Open the door for them and tell them that you love them and that they are beautiful way too much, all the time. Be obnoxious about it. They secretly love it, I promise. I don't care if your daughter is 14 or 64, right? Deep down, at the end of the day, in her heart of hearts, she's still a 7-year-old girl in a princess dress who wants to be told that she's loved, right? Y'all, once again, I do get a little bit emotional about that because the look on some of these young women's faces who just want attention and affection, and it's not coming from dad. And as a result, they've made a lot of bad decisions in the opposite direction, right? Conversations about her dignity and the importance of chastity and her self-worth have to come from you. That cannot be pawned off on mom, right? For guys and girls, those kinds of conversations about things that actually matter, conversations about the faith, right? You living an example of the faith, even if you have to fake it, right? Those are you. You have to have those conversations. If you do nothing more for your daughter than snuggle with her on the couch and tell her that she's good and beautiful all the time, I am convinced that she's going to be better off than the vast majority of young women. And getting to that conversation piece, another thing I hear all the time, I could never talk to my parents about X, Y, or Z because they were uncomfortable or awkward or whatever word you want to put in there. Not to be mean, but nobody cares. Nobody cares that you're uncomfortable. It doesn't matter at all. You have to give the talks. You, not mom, you have to give the talks. And nothing can be off limits in those conversations. I don't care how icky you feel about menstrual cycles, right? Talking about sex with your kids. I don't care how uncomfortable you feel about the word masturbation or pornography or whatever it is when you're speaking with your children, right? You have to do it. Take a very active interest and don't in those questions, and don't ever make them feel bad for asking them. Don't say, who told you that? Where'd you hear about that? Oh, you're going to hear about that in your theology class at school, right? If they go to one of these Catholic schools. You're going to hear about that at Sunday school or youth group. Great. It's fantastic that they're going to hear about it other places, but it doesn't matter nearly as much as it does coming from you. I teach a theology of the body class over at St. John Bosco Academy, and occasionally, maybe once or twice a year, I'll get an email from parents, right? It's sophomores, so 15, 16-year-olds, and I'll get emails from parents accusing me of that me talking about X, Y, or Z and sexual morality, right, was in some way scandalizing or above age appropriate for their child. And I always respond with some version of this, and I'm going to say it less polite than I do in the email, but essentially what it says, what I say is, your kid's 15 or 16 years old. I'm not talking about anything with them that they can't find 1,000, not just conversations about, not just information about, but images and videos of all over the internet, right? Be it girls, be it guys, the sex and degeneracy and rot of the 21st century Western world is in our face all of the time, and they should have heard about it first from mom and dad. But I would rather them hear about it from me than Pornhub or the locker room or the girl who doesn't respect herself that's her best friend, right? Whoever tells it first, whatever it is, wins. And it should come from you. The first time they hear about all the uncomfortable things, the first time they ask a question about all the uncomfortable things, please let it come from you. You're going to lose your relationship with your kids, and they may lose their souls because you're uncomfortable and feel icky when certain topics come up. Love deposits before withdrawals. I didn't know how to phrase this as a question, but I hear this in some version all the time, right? Making withdrawals is easy. And when I say I'm using sort of deposits and withdrawals to say, You have to love your kids. It's not enough to love them, though. They have to know that they're loved. You have to tell them. You have to remind them. You have to do those things with them because you are going to have to take some withdrawals. There are going to be those times when they've got to be hit over the head, metaphorically, right, because of X, Y, or Z, and they need to know in their mind, in their souls, in their hearts, that this is being done because you love them. If it is punishment, 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 right? I'm not trying to teach you a parenting class. Once again, I'm just telling you the things that I'm hearing. I'm biased on this last one. Well, one of the last ones. When I was 14 years old, I got arrested for the first time for stealing a car. It was a purple Jeep Grand Cherokee, and I couldn't figure out how to turn the headlights on. And so I got pulled over at 2 a.m. in Americus, Georgia. As a result, my life went kind of kooky there for a little while. My life ended up being transformed because of a Presbyterian minister who took a liking to me, and eventually that resulted in a conversion to Christianity and then eventually Catholicism, right? But the real hinge point of my entire existence is where I went to school, where I went to college in particular, right? I went to a school that doesn't exist anymore, but some of you might be aware of it. Some of you might have donated money to it, and if you did, I really appreciate it. Southern Catholic College up in Dawsonville, Georgia, closed down in 2010, I believe. And as a result, I'm really biased because a Catholic college literally, I think, saved my life, saved my soul, is the reason I met my bride and have all of my children. That being said, real Catholic colleges, that is to say Orthodox, right, authentically Catholic colleges, or colleges with good, solid Newman centers are a must. A must. I hear this all the time, right? And I'm not saying, I want to make it really, really clear, I'm not saying if your kid doesn't go to Franciscan University, they're going to become addicted to drugs living under a bridge. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, the environment at that school, particularly the Newman Center at that school, if it is a state school, is essential. Georgia Tech, I think more seminarians come out of Georgia Tech than any college in the country other than Texas A&M. I think that's right. Georgia Tech has a phenomenal Newman Center, and it is a state school, right? But you've got to dig into that. You've got to figure it out. And then once again, your parenting doesn't end when they leave your house. You've got to make them go. Whatever financial sway you have over your kid, do you pay their cell phone bill? Do you pay their car insurance? Do you pay for their gas? Do you pay for their car? Right? Do you pay for any of their tuition in college? Whatever financial sway you have over your kid, wield it for the sake of them going to Mass, going to the sacraments, right? Doing these things. And once again, I know what a lot of people are thinking because of the culture that we live in. I can't make my child do that. Yes, you can. And I guarantee you they will be happy that you did it. The sacraments, y'all, are efficacious. They are real. Real things happen when you go to confession, when you go to Mass, when you go and get involved in one of these Catholic communities. Those things are going to happen. I said earlier, your children are going to be the sum total of the 5 people they spend the most time around. And I had a dad tell me one time, a guy much smarter than I am, that if he was being really honest, all the formation that he poured into his child from the time they were infants ultimately boiled down to those first couple weeks of college, having them gravitate towards good human beings who are going to be those 5 people that they spend the most time around. All right, some closing thoughts that I think are really necessary. I'm going to transition here a little bit because I'm no longer talking about what young people have told me. I'm talking about what men way smarter and better at being men have told me. I make a point, I'm really annoying actually, if I'm at this great school, I'm surrounded by some of these great kids, and I make a point of going to the fathers of some of these wonderful young people and saying, what can I do? I want to be like you. I want my kids to be like your kids. How do I do that? You have 7 kids, and the 5 oldest are grown and out of your house, and they're married, and they're happy, and they're joyful, and they're good. What can I do to be like you so I can raise children like you? And I've got a few things I want to throw out there in closing. Number 1, you are the head of your household. That's politically incorrect or whatever you're supposed to say now, but you are the head of your household. If you're bad at your job, that doesn't mean that your wife is the head of your household. It doesn't mean there's another head of your household. It means your household sucks because you're bad at your job. Your house has a bad head of the house, right? That is not acceptable. That's not acceptable for your bride. That's not acceptable for your children. You cannot do it. So change that. If you're struggling, and you've got a spiritual director, you've got a priest, you've got somebody you want to talk to about those sort of things, about how can I be a better leader? How can I be a better man in my household? Do it. Do whatever you need to do. Your house needs a leader who leads, who's good at his job. Second, your opinions matter. They matter to your kids. They matter to your kids when they are teenagers, even if they act like they don't, right? Call it evolutionary biology, call it tribal affiliation, right? That's ingrained in us from when we were running around in caves and all that stuff. You set the culture and the identity for your children and your wife in your household. It falls on your shoulders ultimately, right? Let your kids know who they are. Let them know what they stand for. Give them an identity and a culture that is rooted in something. Because if you don't do anything, right? If you're not taking the lead, guess who's going to raise them? This is going to raise them. The internet's going to raise them. Their friends on the whatever team are going to raise them. And they're going to end up those strangers at your Thanksgiving table that I talked about earlier. Next up, parent. Be a parent. Parents parent. Your kids don't need a friend when they're young. They're going to grow up, hopefully. My dad was the best man in my wedding, right? We were not friends for a lot of my life. And then eventually we became friends. That was really, really good, right? And my dad was not a perfect father, but he was always a very good man. Please, I hear this from guys all the time. I'll hear this from girls occasionally. I talk to a lot more guys, right, about their moms trying to be the cool mom or whatever. But a lot of times I hear this from dads, the winking and nodding when they found out about X, Y, and Z and some girl or, drinking on the weekends or whatever it is, right? They don't need a friend. They need a parent who's going to say, no, this is who we are. This is what the Spann family does. You're a Spann. You don't do that. You're a Showalter. You don't do that. We don't do that. That's not something we do. Oh, this is sort of going back a little bit. And I like how I'll pepper out through these things. Studies. I promise I read something at some point. I cannot cite it for anything. The studies are somewhere locked in the back of my brain. But I promise at some point I read something that said this. Studies show that you, not moms, are the ones who set the tone culturally in your house and the expectations for your children. Set that expectation not just with your rules, but in being the man that your sons need you to be. And being the man that your daughters need you to be. And you can fake it. Because all of you are broken. You're just like me. All of us are broken in some ways. All of us are sinful, right? None of us are perfect. All of our children are going to have some kind of parent wounds. But you're allowed to fake it. It always bothered me. I have all these college friends who will talk about, man, it's gotten a lot harder to sort of maintain my faith life since I had children. And for me, it's been the opposite. Not because I'm so faithful, but because I'm so weak. And I look at my own weaknesses and I look at my children and I say, I have to be better for you. I don't want to go to the Stations of the Cross on, every Friday during Lent. That's not fun. I don't enjoy that. I should, so I do it. And I make myself do it. And I drag myself kicking and screaming across the finish line for all of those things. Set that example. Be the man you want your sons to become and the man you want your daughters to marry because you are masculinity to your children. Spend half the money and twice the time with them. Almost my last piece, right? That's a huge one. It's really great that you got a lot of money. It's really great that Johnny can play 18 different travel sports and be gone playing baseball across the entire southeastern United States. And it's really great that he's good at it. And man, he might get a scholarship to a D2 school. Good for him. Who cares? Spend time with your kids. If it is just shipping them off to do something all the time. And once again, I'm not knocking sports. I used to coach football. My sons played football, baseball. I do those things. I like those things. But a hyper obsession on whatever it is that just involves you throwing money at problems is bad for your children, right? And it's bad for your family, and you're better than that. The last thing I'm going to say, and I think this has been the most profound sort of culture shift in my own household since I cornered a guy named Joe Zuniga at a pig roast one time. He's got a lot of wonderful kids. Some of you might know Joe. He's a great guy. And I said that same thing that I mentioned earlier. How do I make my kids like your kids? How do I do it? I want to be a dad like you. This is what he told me. He said, the elevator pitch, bless your kids every single night. Bless them. You have real power. You have spiritual authority over your wife and your children. Bless your children every night. And if you need a real quick sort of rubric for what that looks like, I'm not good at it. I'm just stealing Mr. Zuniga's. I go in there every night. I have 5 kids. It takes about 2 minutes per kid. Make a cross on their forehead and say, God hold you and may He keep you all the days of your life. And then I affirm them over and over and over again. Even if we just had a fight 5 minutes ago because somebody didn't take out the trash or do the dishes, right? I say, you were good. You are good, and you are strong, and you are brave, and you are tough, and you are beautiful, and you are smart. And I pour love into them, making those love deposits like I talked about earlier. I pour love and affection into them. And a lot of times I don't want to. A lot of times I want to go downstairs and do whatever it was that I was doing earlier, right? I want to go be selfish, but I don't. I sit there and I go through all of it, and then I tell them what I want for them, right? I remind them that they are not their feelings. I remind them that they're not made for this world. I remind them they are beautifully and wonderfully created by a God who wants to spend eternity with him, and that's why he created them. I just pour into them for a few minutes. I tell them I love them. I'm proud of them. I tell them good night. It has been transformative in my family, and I cannot recommend it highly enough. I really appreciate all of you guys being patient with me today and letting me drone on. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We have time. We have about 10 minutes for questions. If anybody's got one, I've got a microphone I can bring to you. Sean, wow, you made it easy for me.
I have 2 questions.
Yes, sir.
First, well, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
First question is simple. I understand that you have a dog named Jeff.
I do, yeah.
Is that dog named after Jeff Showalter?
He is not, no. Different
Just
Jeff.
wanted
Different
to
Jeff.
clear that up. All right.
Yeah, not that Jeff wouldn't be worthy of naming it. He's a great guy.
Second
Killed a bunch of
question.
quail with him a few months ago. That was a blast.
So how do you balance, especially with teenagers, the difference between a directive or a command and an invitation? So as you get teenagers, and you probably know from your own experience, when you tell them to do something, they want to do the opposite thing.
Right.
When you direct them to do something, they want to do what you're telling them not to do.
Right.
So how do you get them to do what you want and balance those two, I guess, poles of directive and invitation?
Great question. And normally when I give this talk, I get a lot of questions like this that involve getting into sort of teenage rearing in a way that I have not done hands-on yet. So I'm going to speak from experience, but that experience is very minimal. I want to make that super clear. Okay. There's a fantastic book called Boundaries out there. You should all read it. It was recommended to me by Father Juan Pablo Duran a while back. And it gets into a lot of sort of the practical stuff of like the garbage needs to be taken out. And it starts with, hey man, I'm really frustrated. I'm directing it back on myself. I'm really frustrated, right, because the garbage hasn't been taken out and I asked you to do that, as opposed to, you didn't take the garbage out. Why didn't you do that, right? It's sort of that, not eating crow, but sort of that self, bringing it back on yourself. But I also think so much of it ultimately boils down to the culture that's already created in your household, right? And the culture of what, I don't want to say, do your children respect you? Because I don't think that has anything to do with respect. I think it's that natural teenage sense of rebellion that exists there. But I can recommend some good books in terms of day-to-day parenting advice. Unfortunately, I just don't have it right now. I wish I did. I could give you a BS answer for 5 more minutes, but I feel like I probably shouldn't do that.
So if it helps any, I was reminded at one point that we're not asked to raise good children. We're asked to raise good adults, and they give us the childhood to do that, but our target isn't good children for a lifetime. So one of the things I would like to understand is, in your experience, if I would have known that, I would change how I behaved. Do you hear from 20-somethings, I can't talk to mom and dad because? Like, what are the because reasons? Like, why wouldn't they talk to us?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, that is one that I can answer more directly. So from a because standpoint, it usually comes down to those 2 words that I used earlier, awkward and uncomfortable, right? I feel uncomfortable or I feel awkward talking to my parents about this because we don't talk about those things, right? The Thanksgiving dinner table is a big piece. That's something that is pretty common. Thanksgiving, Christmas, holidays, right? There are certain topics that I know are off topic when I'm sitting at my table with my mom and dad because it's going to be uncomfortable. They're going to shame me for it. And I don't mean shame like that's bad. Don't ask that. But like, why did you say, who told you this? Oh my goodness, we're at the dinner table. Those types of things. And there's a time or place for it, right? I use menstrual cycles a minute ago. You shouldn't bring up menstrual cycles at Arby's, right, while you're sitting in a crowded restaurant or whatever. But the idea of nothing is off limits. We just have to do it. Now, if the question is, how do you repair that later on? I don't know what the answer is. I don't know how you repair that. I will say I had a really touching conversation with a young man probably half a year ago, right, where he said, I just got a phone call from my dad. He called me after the phone call. He was one of these guys who had asked me to put controls on his phone, right, for the pornography stuff and everything, because he wasn't comfortable telling his dad, right? But he got a phone call from his dad. I don't know this dad from Adam. I don't even know what his name is. He said, my dad just apologized to me for a few minutes and said, I really feel like I failed in some ways. And I think that's so important. I think apologizing to our kids at any stage is so incredibly important, because they need to know that we don't think we're better than them, that we don't think we're talking down to them. I think a way to begin, at least to heal that, is apology. I said earlier, and I mean it, all of your children are going to have parent wounds. All of you have parent wounds. I have parent wounds. My kids will have parent wounds. None of us are perfect, and that's okay. But we can do what we can to acknowledge and repair those 100%. Yeah.
Hi. So first of all, you talk about, I love that idea of your kids, the total of the 5 people they hang around with.
Right. I stole that too. Everything good that I said, I stole. Everything that
yeah.
wasn't good, I made up. Yeah.
Yeah, there's nothing new. Yeah. But I would say that for me personally, as a dad of 5 boys, that scouting is a great program. Mm-hmm. Scouting is a great program for that. It varies a lot from unit to unit, so you have to be careful. But the other thing is that don't put your kids in scouting. Also be a leader in a scout.
Sure.
In a scout unit, because now you're side by side with your kid, but they're also surrounded by other really good men. And so I just wanted to make an endorsement for that. There's a great troop here. I'm not a member of this troop, but come talk to me if you want to ask about that.
No, that is a great pitch. Yeah. I think those, once again, them being with other people who are going to share the values and culture that you share. I will brag to the end of the earth about how great the school I work at is. St. John Bosco Academy is fantastic. That being said, it's not good because we have really good rules. It's not good because I work there. It's not good because we've got a great mission statement or any of that. No, it's really good because the kids sitting in class are sitting next to other kids who are going to say the same kinds of things that you've been trying to inculcate into your child since they were born. And it's real cute that Mr. Spann can get up and walk around and wave his arms and give some talk about X, Y, or Z morality. But man, the captain of the volleyball team, the gorgeous blonde sitting next to your son, raising her hand and saying that means 10,000 times more than what I would say. The 6'5" captain of the basketball team with a square jaw supporting the same moral teachings that you are at home it goes way harder than any teacher could. And maybe you can't do that from a school standpoint. I get that. But those types of extracurriculars, things that you can really get involved with, where they're going to support what you've been saying all along.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, so I've got 5 kids, 8 down to 2. And you probably see a lot of kids, you're around them. Where do you see, kind of in your opinion, and it can be from you or from the groups you're in with you leading your school, on discipline? My wife and I we disagree a lot on this. She came from one younger sister, nothing. I'm the oldest of 7, 5 boys. My father was extremely, old school corporal punishment. And so
right.
I see in my younger siblings a lot of resentment towards him for that. I appreciate it. As I get older, I think he did the best he could. But my point is, I get a lot of pushback from my wife on any kind of physical discipline, things
right.
like that. And so it's like, where do we find the middle ground? Where do you see kind of a middle ground that you would suggest?
No, great question, especially from the resentment standpoint and all of that. I was spanked when I was a kid. I spanked my kids. Not very often. The girls hardly ever, right? Because I think that's, when I say spank, maybe a swat on the butt, because I just don't want to be this big guy lording myself over them and scare them and have that same sort of thing happen. I think not disciplining in anger is such a huge piece of that, right? That the fact that you are smacking your kid on the butt, or I do that on the back of my son's head when he didn't say, when he said something off color in front of the first grade teacher or something that actually happened. I'm like, stop it, what are you doing, right? The idea is they're never done in anger. That being, I go and I'll get upset somewhere else and then come in and like, all right, brother, you're getting a spanking, sorry. That being said, I think discipline is so temperament driven, right? I have a son, or I have 4 daughters. One of my daughters would not, I swear, I've never had to do this, but I think she would laugh at me if I spanked her, right? Which would make me angry and I want to spank her more, right? But she's super driven by FOMO, right? If you send that girl to her room, or you say you're going to go eat dinner by yourself and then go to bed and not come back out tonight, that will change her world. I do think it's super temperament driven. If you have ever read The Five Temperaments, I suggest you do it. I know it's like white middle-aged woman territory, but it's great. So you should check out the Five Temperament book too. The Temperament God Gave Your Kids, pretty awesome.
No, that's exactly. Yeah, well, I feel better now. It's kind of like where we're trying to practice a little bit on the anger and things like that.
And it's hard. I struggle with anger, dude. I really do. That was a long conversation with my spiritual director about 10 years ago that really sort of shifted my opinion on that. My dad didn't hit me. My mom, she didn't mess around though. Yeah.
I have a 6, 8, and 9-year-old boy,
Awesome.
and I'm looking for a summer program. Do you have any? Can I just send them to your farm all summer?
Yeah, they can chop wood for me. You'd be surprised. We actually have a rotation of boys that come over during the summer just to do work for us. That being said, one that I highly, highly, highly recommend is Camp Atlantis that Father Patrick O'Loughlin does up in Jasper, Georgia. It's on 40 acres. They're in the middle of nowhere. And it's like a Catholic Lord of the Rings thing. Has anybody had a kid who went there? Anybody have a kid who went through Camp Atlantis? Come on. Isn't it phenomenal? It is physically difficult. It is painful. And I dress up as an orc with a bunch of other dads and go out there and hit kids with foam swords and all this. It's intense and it's fantastic. It is. I feel like so many programs cater to a more feminized church, and I think that's super disordered, right? Our boys don't want to just sing Kumbaya, right, and raise their hands up in the air. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's great. There's a place for that for sure. But our boys want dragons to slay and princesses to save, and they want to understand the truth of our faith. That is, it is a masculine, strong thing. I think the Legion. I'm not Regnum Christi. That being said, I think the Legion does a phenomenal job with all of their summer programs. I can't think of any others offhand, but I'm sure there's some other great ones out there. Yeah.
Hey,
Cool.
no more questions? We're good. Perfect timing.
Thank you guys so much for having me. I really appreciate it. God bless.